cameras flashed blindly as Lorenzo Moretti's heavy hand clamped onto my waist, his diamond pinky ring digging into my plus-size curves. "Meet my future wife," the city's most ruthless underboss roared to the press. Then he leaned into my ear and whispered the 4 words that froze my heart. Chicago's elite gathered at the Palmer House Hilton, drowning in champagne, classical strings, and the stench of old, dirty money. I was never supposed to be here. I was 28, a senior auditor at Grant Thornton, and my idea of a wild Friday night was a true crime documentary and ordering extra garlic knots to my apartment in Naperville. I tugged uncomfortably at the bodice of my emerald green MacDougall gown. At a size 20, finding a dress that accommodated my broad shoulders, thick thighs, and soft, heavy stomach without making me look like a draped sofa was a miracle. But standing in a sea of size 0 socialites and statuesque mob wives, I felt like a massive, blinking neon sign of inadequacy. I was only at this charity gala because my firm's managing partner forced me to attend. For the past 3 months, I had been buried in the financial records of Borelli Imports, a massive logistics company that practically ran the ports of Chicago. Ostensibly, it was a legitimate business. Realistically, everyone knew it was the primary laundering front for the Moretti crime family. I had been brought in to rubber stamp their quarterly filings, a routine task for a junior partner. But I had found something, a massive, glaring anomaly. $4 million systematically bled out through inflated invoices to a phantom shell company called Apex Logistics. I hadn't told my bosses yet. I was too terrified. I had just kept my head down, hiding behind my computer screens, relying on the one truth of my life. Fat girls are invisible. People look at you, but they don't see you. They dismiss you. In the corporate world, my weight made me a background character. Nobody suspected the quiet, overweight accountant in the corner cubicle of unraveling the city's most dangerous criminal enterprise. I grabbed a flute of champagne from a passing waiter, hoping the alcohol would calm my racing pulse. That's when the temperature in the room seemed to drop by 10 degrees. The crowd parted. Lorenzo Moretti had arrived. At 34, Lorenzo was a terrifyingly beautiful force of nature. He wasn't the stereotypical cigar-chomping mobster from the movies. He was tailored precision in a charcoal Brioni suit, his dark hair swept back, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass, and his obsidian eyes scanning the room with the predatory calm of a wolf sizing up a flock of sheep. He had recently taken over the family after his father, Don Carmine, suffered a highly suspicious heart attack. Rumors swirled that Lorenzo was ruthless, brilliant, and actively purging traitors from his ranks. I tried to shrink behind a marble pillar. I watched as beautiful, waif-thin heiresses and Russian models threw themselves into his orbit, desperate for a glance. He ignored them all. Instead, his dark eyes locked onto my corner of the room. My breath hitched. He's not looking at me, I told myself. He can't be. I'm nobody. But his long, purposeful strides carried him straight past the glittering elite, straight past the mayor of Chicago, directly to the pillar where I was trying to melt into the wallpaper. He stopped inches from me. He was so close I could smell his cologne, bergamot, cedar, and something uniquely dangerous. "Chloe Patterson," he said, his voice a low, gravelly baritone that sent a shiver straight down my spine. I nearly dropped my champagne. "How do you know my name?" Lorenzo didn't answer. Instead, his gaze dropped, taking in my full figure. It wasn't the look of disgust or dismissal I was so used to receiving from men in his tax bracket. It was a dark, calculated appraisal. A heavy, possessive hand suddenly clamped onto my waist, his fingers pressing firmly into the soft curve of my hip. I gasped, trying to pull away, but his grip was iron. "Walk with me. Do not pull away. Do not cause a scene," he murmured, his lips brushing the shell of my ear. "Let go of me," I hissed, panic rising in my throat. "I don't know you." "You know my ledgers, Miss Patterson," Lorenzo countered smoothly, steering me toward the grand staircase where the press pool was waiting. "You know about Apex Logistics, which means you currently hold the keys to my empire. Now smile." Before I could process the sheer terror of him knowing about my audit, we were pushed out onto the landing. Blinding camera flashes erupted like lightning. Reporters surged forward, screaming his name. Lorenzo pulled me flush against his side, his arm wrapping entirely around my thick waist, anchoring me to him in a possessive display that silenced the room. "Mr. Moretti, who is the woman?" a reporter from the Chicago Tribune shouted. Lorenzo's grip tightened. He looked out at the flashing cameras, a cold, triumphant smirk playing on his lips. "I told you all I would be making an announcement regarding the future of the Moretti family tonight." He turned his head, looking down at me with an intensity that made my knees weak. "Meet my future wife." The ballroom erupted into chaos. My brain flatlined. Future wife? I opened my mouth to scream, to deny it, to call for security. But before a single sound could escape my lips, Lorenzo leaned down. To the cameras, it looked like a passionate lover's whisper, but his next words stunned me. "Smile beautifully, Chloe," he whispered, his tone devoid of any warmth. "If you panic now, the man standing outside your sister Hannah's apartment in Lincoln Park will kick down her door. Play along, or she dies tonight." The ride away from the Palmer house was a blur of flashing police lights and the muted hum of a heavily armored Chevy Suburban. I sat plastered against the reinforced door, my breathing shallow and erratic. Across from me, in the dim cabin, sat Lorenzo, calmly pouring himself a glass of scotch from the car's crystal decanter as we sped down Lake Shore Drive. In the front, a hulking man I would later learn was named Dante, kept his eyes glued to the rearview mirror. "You're hyperventilating," Lorenzo observed coldly, holding the glass out to me. "Drink this." "I don't want your scotch," I choked out, my hands trembling so violently I had to clench them in the fabric of my dress. "I want to know if my sister is safe. I did exactly what you asked. I smiled, I waved. Now call off your hitman." Lorenzo took a slow sip of the amber liquid. "There is no hitman, Chloe. Hannah is currently asleep on her couch watching reality television. My men are stationed outside her building to protect her, not harm her." "Protect her from who?" I demanded, the adrenaline finally morphing into outrage. "The only monster in our lives right now is you. Why are you doing this? Look at me, Lorenzo." I gestured frantically to my body, the way the tight silk of the dress squeezed my stomach, the sheer volume of space I took up in the seat. "I am a fat accountant from the suburbs. I drive a 2014 Honda Civic. I spend my weekends at Target. I am not Mafia Princess material. Your entire world is going to know this is a sham." Lorenzo's dark eyes narrowed. He set his glass down and leaned forward, invading my space until I was forced to look directly into his terrifyingly calm face. "That," Lorenzo said softly, "is exactly why I chose you." I blinked, thrown off guard by the total sincerity in his voice. Because I'm fat. Because you are invisible to them, Lorenzo corrected, his gaze dropping momentarily to my chest before rising to meet my eyes. My Uncle Leo has been bleeding my family dry for 2 years. He set up Apex Logistics. He's funding a coup against me. If I married Isabella, or a Russian cartel daughter, or a political heiress, my uncle would see it coming. He would calculate the alliance. But you? Lorenzo reached out, his thumb lightly tracing the line of my jaw. I flinched, but he didn't pull away. You, he continued, his voice dropping to a near purr, are a civilian, a plus-size corporate auditor. To the brutal men in my circle, you are an anomaly. They will look at you and think I have lost my mind. They will underestimate you. They will dismiss you. They will never suspect that the woman wearing my ring is the only financial genius brilliant enough to track my uncle's stolen millions. The car turned sharply, descending into an underground VIP garage. My mind was spinning. He wasn't just using me as a meat shield, he was weaponizing my biggest insecurity. He knew exactly how the world viewed my body, and he was using that prejudice as a tactical smokescreen to hide my brain. I won't do it, I said stubbornly, as Dante opened the car door. I won't launder your money or help you kill your uncle. I'm going to the FBI. Lorenzo stepped out of the car, extending a hand to me. When I refused to take it, he simply reached in, gripped my waist, and effortlessly pulled my heavy frame out of the SUV as if I weighed nothing. You can't go to the FBI, Chloe, because the signature approving the last 3/4 of Borelli Imports' fraudulent taxes is yours. If I go down, you go down for aiding a criminal syndicate. Grant Thornton will throw you to the wolves. A cold sweat broke out across my forehead. He had trapped me perfectly. We ascended a private elevator to the penthouse of the St. Regis. The doors opened to a sprawling, cold expanse of glass and black marble overlooking the glittering Chicago skyline. But the luxury was overshadowed by the scene in the center of the living room. 2 men in dark suits were holding a battered, bloody man to his knees on a plastic tarp. I gasped, clapping my hands over my mouth. Welcome home, mia dolcezza, Lorenzo mocked softly, guiding me into the room. He pointed to the man on the floor, who looked up with a swollen, bruised eye. This is Matteo. He's one of my uncle's low-level bagmen. He refuses to give me the decryption key to the offshore accounts you found. I tried to back away, the reality of the violence crashing over me. No, I don't want to see this. Let me go. Lorenzo stepped behind me, his broad chest pressed flush against my back, his arms coming around me, entirely encompassing my thick waist. It was a suffocating, terrifying embrace, but undeniably protective. He rested his chin on my shoulder, forcing me to look at the bleeding man. You are my queen now, Chloe, Lorenzo whispered into my ear, his breath hot against my skin. The contrast between his violent environment and the gentle, almost reverent way his hands settled on my curves was maddening. Show them why I chose you. Tell Matteo exactly how you traced the money through the Cayman routing numbers. Break his spirit with your beautiful mind, or Dante will break his fingers. I stared at the bleeding man, then down at the massive diamond ring Lorenzo had somehow slipped onto my finger during the car ride. I was trapped in a golden cage, tethered to a monster who saw me more clearly than anyone else ever had. And heaven help me, as Lorenzo's thumb stroked the soft flesh of my stomach, I realized I was going to help him. Matteo spat a glob of saliva onto the pristine marble floor, his swollen eye glaring up at us with venomous defiance. He was banking on my weakness, He looked at my shaking hands, my soft, trembling curves stuffed into the emerald gown, and saw exactly what every corporate bully in my life had seen: a cowardly, overweight pushover who would crumble under pressure. "Go to hell, Moretti," Matteo sneered, exposing blood-stained teeth. "Your fat little accountant isn't going to do anything. She's going to piss herself and cry." Anger, hot, sudden, and completely foreign, flared in my chest, burning away the icy edges of my terror. I had spent my entire life shrinking to make other people comfortable. I had endured the snide comments about my weight from thin, vicious co-workers. I had hidden in my cubicle. But staring at this bleeding criminal who thought I was nothing but a joke, something inside me snapped. "Dante," I said, my voice shockingly steady. "Hand me the laptop on the credenza." Dante, the hulking bodyguard, glanced at Lorenzo. Lorenzo gave a tight, approving nod. A sleek MacBook Pro was placed into my hands. I dropped to my knees on the plastic tarp, not caring that the hem of my designer dress brushed against Matteo's blood. "Let's see," I murmured, my fingers flying across the keyboard with the muscle memory of a woman who lived and breathed financial data. "Apex Logistics. You set up a shell corporation in Delaware, but you made a rookie mistake, Matteo. You used the same registered agent for Apex that you used for your personal LLC. The one holding the deed to the property at 4420 North Racine Avenue." Matteo's arrogant smirk faltered. The color drained from his bruised face. "That's a multi-family residential building," I continued, turning the screen so the harsh blue light illuminated his terror. "Fully renovated, and according to Cook County property tax records, it's entirely inhabited by your ex-wife and your 3 daughters, including the one who just started her freshman year at Northwestern University. Tuition paid in full via wire transfers from an account at Northern Trust." "Don't you dare," Matteo breathed, struggling against the men holding him down. "I don't need your decryption key to find the $4 million, I lied smoothly, staring dead into his eyes. "I just need to trigger a FINRA audit and an IRS Form 3949-A reporting suspicious offshore income tied to that Northern Trust account. The feds will freeze your properties by tomorrow morning. Your daughters will be evicted. Your ex-wife goes to federal prison for tax evasion, and Northwestern expels your oldest for tuition fraud. You lose everything, Matteo. Every dime, every brick, every person you love." Silence hung heavy in the penthouse, broken only by the hum of the city wind against the floor-to-ceiling glass. Even Dante looked slightly terrified of me. I leaned closer, dropping my voice to a lethal whisper. "Or you can give me the 8-digit alphanumeric key for the Cayman routing number, and your daughters get to stay in their beautiful safe home. Your choice." Matteo swallowed hard, his chest heaving. He looked past me to Lorenzo, realizing he had drastically underestimated the weapon the underboss had brought into this war. "Capital K," Matteo choked out, defeated. 7-4, lowercase j, 9-9, capital X, 2. "Smart man," Lorenzo murmured. He gestured to Dante. "Get him out of my sight. Clean the floor." As the men dragged a weeping Matteo out of the penthouse, the adrenaline that had been holding me upright vanished. My knees gave out, but before I could hit the floor, Lorenzo caught me. His strong arms wrapped securely around my thick waist, lifting me effortlessly against his broad chest. "You," Lorenzo rumbled, carrying me towards the velvet sofa as if I weighed nothing more than a feather. "Are absolutely magnificent." He set me down gently, pouring a fresh glass of water and pressing it to my lips. My hands were shaking too badly to hold it, so he guided the crystal to my mouth himself. His dark, dangerous eyes swept over my flushed face, down to my full breasts, heaving against the silk of my dress, and rested on the soft, heavy curve of my stomach. I was terrifying, I whispered, a tear finally slipping down my cheek. I threatened his children. I'm a monster. You are a survivor, Lorenzo corrected, kneeling in front of the sofa. He didn't pull away from my sighs. Instead, he pushed the heavy fabric of the gown aside, resting his large, calloused palms directly on my thick thighs. The heat of his touch sent a jolt of electricity straight to my core. You protected what is ours. You took up space, Chloe. You dominated that room. Never apologize for your brilliance or your presence. They'll never accept me, I confessed, my voice cracking. Your family, the other bosses. I don't look like a mob wife. I'm fat, Lorenzo. Look at me. They'll laugh at you behind your back for choosing a woman who looks like me. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. He stood up, pulling me up with him until I was pressed flush against his hard, muscular frame. His hands slid to my lower back, gripping the lush fullness of my hips with a possessive, almost reverent hunger. Let them laugh, he growled fiercely, his lips hovering inches from mine. Let them underestimate you. They are starving for the approval of society, eating salads and marrying walking skeletons who couldn't balance a checkbook. I want a woman with substance. I want a woman whose mind is a steel trap and whose body fills my hands. You are a queen, Chloe, and tomorrow night at my Uncle Leo's dinner, you are going to help me slaughter the rest of my enemies. Heavy mahogany walls and the sharp scent of expensive cigar smoke choked the private dining room at Gibson's Bar and Steakhouse. The legendary Chicago establishment had been cleared of normal patrons. Tonight, it belonged entirely to the Moretti Syndicate. I sat at Lorenzo's right hand, wearing a custom-tailored scarlet Valentino gown he had ordered directly to the penthouse. It hugged every curve, accentuating the dramatic hourglass of my waist and the fullness of my chest. For the first time in my 28 years, I didn't feel the desperate urge to hide my body. Lorenzo's heavy, possessive hand rested openly on my thigh beneath the table, a constant, burning reminder of the power I wielded. Across the sprawling table sat Uncle Leo, a graying, vulture-like man with cold eyes. Surrounding him were three of his most loyal capos and, to my absolute shock, a civilian. Thomas Bradley, the senior managing partner at Grant Thornton. My boss. My breath hitched. Thomas, the man who had assigned me the Borelli imports audit, the man who constantly made subtle, cruel jokes about my lunch choices in the break room, was sitting with the Chicago Mafia. Lorenzo, Uncle Leo sneered, raising a glass of Barolo wine. We were surprised by your unconventional choice in a bride, a civilian accountant, and one who clearly enjoys her pasta. The capos chuckled. Thomas Bradley smirked, refusing to look me in the eye. Lorenzo didn't flinch. His grip on my thigh tightened slightly, but his voice was smooth velvet. Chloe's appetite is perfect as it is, Leo. What concerns me is your appetite. Specifically, your appetite for my family's money. The temperature in the room plummeted. Uncle Leo set his glass down. Careful, nephew. I brought Thomas here to clear the air. Thomas has been very helpful ensuring the feds stay away from our port operations. He tells me your new fiancée was quietly poking around accounts she had no business looking at. That she's a liability. Thomas finally looked at me, his eyes filled with corporate disdain. I'm sorry, Chloe, but you should have stuck to the minor ledgers. I told Leo you found the apex anomaly. You're in over your head. You're just a junior auditor. The betrayal stung, But then the pieces of the puzzle clicked together in my brilliant, analytical mind. Thomas wasn't just a bystander. He was the architect. He had built the Apex shell companies for Leo. He had assigned me to the audit because he thought I was too fat, too quiet, and too stupid to put the pieces together. He thought I would be the perfect scapegoat when the money eventually went missing. A liability, I repeated, my voice echoing in the dead silence of the private dining room. I didn't shrink. I didn't look down. I sat up perfectly straight, letting my shoulders broaden. Yes, Leo spat, abandoning the pretense of family dinner. He gestured to the armed men flanking the doors. You've lost, Lorenzo. Matteo gave us the heads up that you grabbed him. But you don't have the decryption keys to the Cayman accounts. Without that money, you can't pay the dock workers, the judges, or the police. By midnight, your empire collapses, and I take my rightful place as Don. Hand over the girl, and maybe I let you leave Chicago alive. Lorenzo leaned back in his chair, picking up his scotch. He looked completely unbothered. Tell them, mia dolcezza. I smiled. It wasn't a sweet, accommodating smile. It was the lethal, calculating smirk of a woman who held the world by the throat. You're right, Thomas, I said smoothly, reaching into my designer clutch and pulling out a single sheet of paper. I am just an auditor, which means I know that offshore Cayman accounts have an automatic 24-hour hold on bulk transfers exceeding $2 million. Unless, of course, the receiving account is a previously authenticated corporate entity. Thomas's face went completely white. I slid the paper across the mahogany table. While Lorenzo was dealing with Matteo last night, I used Matteo's decryption key. But I didn't just look at the money, Leo. I initiated a wire transfer. All $4 million of the money you stole from the Moretti family has been successfully rerouted out of Apex Logistics. Leo snatched the paper. His eyes darted frantically over the confirmation codes. You transferred it back into Borelli Imports, Thomas gasped, realizing the catastrophic failure of his plan. Better, I corrected sharply. I transferred it into a newly established, fully legitimate philanthropic trust at Chase Bank, the Carmine Moretti Memorial Foundation, with myself as the sole legal executor. The money is locked behind a biometric wall and a board of civilian directors. It's perfectly clean, completely legal, and entirely untouchable by you. The room erupted. Leo roared in fury, reaching for the weapon inside his jacket. He never made it. In a blur of motion, Dante and Lorenzo's loyal men drew their suppressed weapons, training lasers directly onto the chests of Leo and his capos. Lorenzo stood up slowly, the terrifying aura of the Don rolling off him in waves. He walked around the table, stopping behind my chair and resting both hands possessively on my shoulders. You have no money, Leo, Lorenzo said coldly, which means you have no army. You are finished. You let a fat bitch steal my throne? Leo screamed, spit flying from his lips. Lorenzo's hand moved faster than lightning. He grabbed Leo by the back of the neck and slammed his face brutally into the mahogany table. Blood shattered across the crystal glasses. You will refer to her as your queen, Lorenzo growled, the violent promise of death in his eyes. You and your men have exactly 1 hour to leave Chicago. If I ever see your faces in my city again, I will let my wife audit your breathing. He let Leo drop to the floor. The broken old man scrambled backward, his capos dragging him out of the room in absolute disgrace. That left Thomas Bradley, trembling uncontrollably in his tailored suit. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. Chloe, please. I was your mentor. I hired you. We can work this out. Don't let them kill me. I looked at the man who had belittled me, who had tried to frame me, who had banked his entire criminal enterprise on the assumption that my weight made me worthless. The power reversal was absolute, and it tasted sweeter than champagne. I'm not going to kill you, Thomas, I said calmly, standing up to my full imposing height. But I did forward an encrypted file containing all your communications with Leo to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division about 10 minutes before we arrived. They should be raiding your office at Grant Thornton right about now. Thomas let out a sob of despair as Dante grabbed him by the collar, dragging him out to the alley to await the police sirens that were already wailing in the distance. The dining room was quiet again. I stood there, my heart pounding, realizing the magnitude of what I had just done. I had dismantled a mafia coup using nothing but a laptop and my own brilliant mind. Lorenzo walked over to me. He didn't care about the blood on the table or the empire he had just secured. His dark eyes were fixed entirely on me, burning with a fierce, all-consuming devotion. He stepped into my space, wrapping his arms around my waist and pulling my heavy curves flush against his hard body. "A fake engagement, huh?" he murmured, his thumb tracing my jawline. I looked up into his eyes, my breath catching as his gaze dropped to my lips. I thought I was just a smokescreen. "You were the trap," Lorenzo whispered fiercely, his hands sliding down to grip my hips, and they walked right into it. "But there is nothing fake about this, Chloe. You are mine, my genius, my queen." When his lips crashed down onto mine, it wasn't a performance for the press. It was a claiming. It was rough, passionate, and entirely real. I melted against him, my hands tangling in his dark hair, finally stepping out of the shadows and into the blinding, dangerous light of my new empire. And that is how the invisible accountant became the untouchable Queen of Chicago. What an insane power move by Chloe, using her brains to bankrupt the villains and secure her man. Do you love a story where the underestimated heroine completely flips the script? Smash that like button, hit share, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more thrilling, pulse-pounding romance stories. Let me know in the comments, what was your favorite twist in this series?